What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG TCG video. Today, guys, we are going to be going over the new Byssted Archetype. I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce the name of this archetype that is set to release in Darkwing Blast. Very excited to be going over this new archetype with you guys, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, as per usual with these card game videos, I'll go over the monsters first, and the extra deck monsters, and end it off with the spells and traps. And the first card we're going to be discussing is Byssted Magnamut. It is a level 6 Dark Dragon effect monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. You can target one light or dark monster in either graveyard, banish it, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. This is a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. If this card is special summoned, you can activate this effect. Add one dragon monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand during the end phase of this turn, except this monster. So this is actually a really cool monster. The first effect is very fascinating. You can just banish any light and dark monster from either player's graveyard, and you can special summon this card. So that's already good right there. It's an easy way to special summon this card to your field. But what's also really cool about this effect is that it could be a quick effect when your opponent has a monster on the field, which, your opponent's going to have a monster on the field, so most of the time, this is going to be a quick effect, so you can activate this during your opponent's turn, and then since this card will be special summoned during that end phase, you could literally search for any dragon monster, and it's not just restricted to the archetype, it's any dragon monster, and you are basically able to add it to your hand during the end phase. So, yeah, this is actually a really powerful card. Not only is it extremely easy to get it out to the field, but also you can search for any dragon monster and add it to your hand. So, yeah, overall, this is a really powerful card in my opinion. So with that said, the next card that we're going to be discussing is Byssted Saronir. I think that's how you're supposed to say it. It's a level 6 Dark Dragon effect monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, so the same as the last one. And you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name once per turn. Not going to read the first effect. It's the same as the last monster where you can banish a light or dark monster in the graveyard and you can special summon this card. The second effect is the unique effect of this monster, which is if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send one Byssted monster except this card or one branded spell and trap from your deck to the graveyard. Okay, this is actually a really cool effect. Sending a Byssted monster to the graveyard, I guess that can set you up for a dark monster in your graveyard, so that way you can banish it to be able to summon more of your Byssted monsters, so maybe that's what the goal with it is. Obviously, we still have some more monsters that we're going to be going over, so they might have some graveyard effects that might kind of contribute to this monster, but what's interesting is that you can also send a branded spell and trap from your deck to the graveyard, which there are a couple of branded cards that actually have graveyard effects, so you can just send them straight to the graveyard, activate their effects, and then you're off to the races. So overall, actually, this is a pretty cool card. I do want to see more of the Byssted cards, or monsters specifically, because I want to see if they have any graveyard effects to really see if it's worth kind of sending them to the graveyard, because being able to send branded spell and traps to activate their graveyard effects is good, but I want to see the full potential of this with the Byssted monsters as well, so we're just going to have to wait and see it on that, but from the knowledge that we know of so far, pretty cool effect in my opinion. So with that, the next card that we're going to be discussing is Byssted Dreadworm. I think that's how you're supposed to say it as well. Level 6 Dark Dragon effect monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, so same as the last two, and it seems like the first effect is the same as well. So we're just going to skip to the second effect, and it's the same as the last ones as well, where you can only activate the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. We're just going to go straight to the second effect, which reads, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target one opponent's special summon monster, send it to the graveyard. Okay, so that's actually really cool. So if this card is sent from your field to the graveyard, so you can destroy it by a card effect, it doesn't matter, especially since it's sent from the field to the graveyard, so it can be by any means. You can target an opponent's special summon monster and send it to the graveyard, which is really solid, so you can basically get rid of one of their big boss monsters on the field as long as it doesn't obviously get negated. But if you're able to have it to where your opponent cannot respond to this effect, you could basically start getting rid of their big boss monsters, and especially since you have this, most of those monsters are from the extra deck these days, or normally a special summon, being able to get a big boss monster off of the field, that sounds like a solid effect to me in my opinion. So yeah, overall, really cool card in my opinion. And with that, we're going to get into now our boss monsters for this new archetype, which The first one being the Byssted Lebellion. It is a level 8 light dragon effect monster with 2500 attack and 3000 defense, and cannot be normal summon set, must be special summoned from your hand or graveyard. So we got our first graveyard Byssted monster by attributing one level 6 or higher dark dragon monster. So any of the Byssted monsters we went over earlier, you can just tribute them off and special summon this monster. So that's pretty cool. You can only special summon the Byssted Lebellions once per turn this way. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name once per turn. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, add one Byssted monster from your deck to your hand, except this card. During the main phase, you can place one branded continuous spell and trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. So this is actually a really powerful effect. Being able to just summon this monster from your graveyard that easily is really cool. And the reason why I think that's important to summon it from your graveyard is because you can just pitch this card from your hand to the graveyard, add any Byssted monster you want to your hand. You can summon that Byssted monster by banishing any of your other light or dark monsters in your graveyard, and then now that you have a Byssted monster that's a level 6 on your field, you just tribute that off and you can summon this behemoth to the field, and then you can search for any of your branded continuous spell and trap cards in your deck and then place them face up into your spell and trap card zone, so that way you can start getting the benefits from your branded spells and traps. So yeah, very powerful card in my opinion. Just not only is it a searcher for the deck, but it helps you get your branded spells and traps into rotation, so that way you can start getting the benefits and pluses off of those cards. So yeah, this card is a very solid boss monster in my opinion, especially with that searcher. I think the fact that this card can easily search monsters and can easily special summon itself back to the field from your graveyard, definitely a very good card in my opinion. But with that said, it's going to lead us into the next monster, which is the Byssted Albalos, a level 12 light dragon effect monster with 3500 attack and defense, and cannot be normal summon set. Must be special summoned from your hand or graveyard by attributing 2 Byssted monsters. While you control this card summoned this way, negate the effects of all Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters on the field. If this face-up card you control leaves the field by an opponent's effect, you can banish all face-down cards in each player's extra deck face-up until your opponent's end phase. So this is actually a really fascinating card. This card basically reads, it's an anti-extra deck card. Basically, screw the extra deck. Because this card, while it's on the field, which, by the way, not really that hard of a card to summon. Yeah, you need 2 Byssted monsters onto the field. So it is a little restrictive, but it's a level 12 monster. What you really expect. And honestly, it's not as bad as it first seems, because Byssted monsters seem like they're not really that hard to summon, so I don't think this is going to be that hard of a boss monster to summon, but being able to negate any extra deck monster is insane enough. And hell, let's just throw rituals in there for kicks and giggles. So all you Drytron players out there, guess what? You ain't going to be having the greatest time dealing with this card. And looking at how, you know, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, where a lot of decks really do focus on the extra deck. Like, think of some meta decks right now. I think of, like, Splight relies on Xyz monsters. You have Despia that relies on fusions. Hell, Albaz technically focuses on fusions as well, so Albaz kind of gets screwed. You also have something like Tellerments, which also are fusion based. You have kind of think of like a synchro deck. You have Sword Soul that's focused around that. So yeah, basically with how like the meta is today, with all of these different decks that rely on the extra deck, being able to make it to where your opponent can just not use any of their effects is good enough there. And then if this card leaves the field by your opponent, which is a good chance that they might try to do that, because obviously they want to go into the best boards that they possibly can, they might want to get this card off the field, but you do end up punishing them for that, because basically if they try to bounce this card back to your hand or try to destroy it, whatever the case might be, you can just basically pop their entire extra deck, which is insane in my opinion. And honestly, I think that's like a really solid effect. It does your extra deck as well, which is a little unfortunate, and that's kind of the same with the first effect. It does affect your field as well, but hey, you have this beefy level 12 monster with a pretty high attack point stat, so if this is the only monster you have in your field, it's not really that much of a downside. And again, being able to make it to where potentially your opponent cannot use the extra deck would have liked if I would have been able to control that. But you know what? It's either your opponent just has to find a way to deal with it, or just doesn't use the extra deck. Like, that's the only choices that they really have. So, yeah, overall, honestly, I think this is a really solid card. It's not as great as it might first seem because there is some negatives toward it, but I do think there is some benefit to playing this card. So, in my opinion, I think it's a pretty solid card. And with that said, that's going to be it for the main deck monsters. No extra deck monsters to go over, so we'll just jump now into the spells and traps. And the first card we're going to be discussing is Rebranded, a continuous spell that reads, you can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. Also, you can only use the second effect of this card's name once per chain. So that's interesting, it's a once per chain effect. If a light and or dark monster is banished, you can target one of them, place it on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, draw one card. Once per turn, when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can target one Byssted monster in your graveyard, special summon it. Okay, so this is actually a pretty cool card. The first effect I actually think is really good, especially with this being a continuous spell, because not only can you just bring back resources from your Banish Zone into the deck, but you also get draw a card, which is really cool, especially since this is a continuous spell, so every turn you could just be adding resources back to your deck and just getting a free +1 right off the bat. So that's actually really cool. And then the second effect, to be able to target a Byssted monster in your graveyard and special summon it, is cool. You do have to rely on your opponent normal or special summoning a monster in order to do it. And also it's a once per chain effect instead of just a regular once per turn effect. So there is a little bit of a difference with how you can use this card, but it's not really that big of a deal if I'm going to be completely honest. It's not really as bad as it might first seem. It isn't really that hard to be able to get it in a chain, especially since you can just do it when your opponent tries to special summon a monster. So it's not really hard to be able to do that. And hey, being able to monster reborn back any of your Byssted monsters from the graveyard is actually really solid in my opinion. So yeah, pretty cool card in my opinion. And with that said, this is going to lead us into the final card of this video, which is Branded Beast, a continuous trap which reads, you can only use a second effect of this card's name once per turn. Once per turn during the main phase, if you control a Byssted monster, you contribute one dragon monster, then target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. During the end phase, you can target one branded continuous spell in your graveyard, place it face up on your field. Okay, this is actually a really cool card. So this card, basically every turn after you activate this, you can just tribute any dragon monster in the field as long as you control a Byssted monster, and you just get to pop a card in your opponent's field. So yeah, that's actually really cool. Just being able to pop stuff in your opponent's field is actually really cool. And then during your end phase, you can target any branded continuous spell in your graveyard. So this actually works with the rebranded card we just went over. If your opponent tries to pop that card, which more than likely they're going to pop it, they don't want you to get resources every turn. Guess what? If you just flip this card up during the end phase, you can just bring back any branded continuous spell and place it face up into your field. So guess what? Every turn you basically can get back rebranded if your opponent is trying to get rid of it, or you can just bring back any branded spell card. It doesn't really matter which one it is. You can just bring back any branded spell and trap card. So honestly, that's a really cool and solid effect in my opinion. And yeah, honestly, I think this is actually a really good card in my opinion. But with that being said, that's going to be it for this new Byssted archetype, plus some new branded cards as well. So yeah, general thoughts on the new Byssted archetype. I think it's a pretty solid archetype. I think based off of the support that we got for this first batch, I think this deck can have a lot of potential for the main game and especially towards the meta. Now, do I think this is going to be a meta-defying deck? Not right now. I do think there is some more tweaks that the deck can have, but honestly, I think this is a very good start, especially since it is tied in with branded, so you could do some pretty cool stuff with the Albaz stuff that we got in the Albaz structure deck, which, let me just say this, they really love giving branded just support. I mean, again, we have that Albaz structure deck, and then now we have this Byssted archetype, which has some really cool cards with the level 6 monsters, and then you even have Lebellion that can search for your Byssted monsters, and then Albalos that can basically be an anti-extra deck towards your opponent and towards yourself, but you can play around that to make it more towards your opponents and not really affect you too much. So that's pretty cool. And then even the two branded cards that we got in this support as well, I think is pretty solid, especially that rebranded card. Being able to get a additional card every turn is actually really cool, and you get resources back into your deck so you can combo off even further. So yeah, and not even saying anything towards the trap either. either. I think the trap has some potential as well. I think that trap is pretty cool as well. But with that being said, you know, I really do think this archetype is off to a strong start, and I cannot wait to see what else they're going to do with this new archetype. But with that being said, that is going to be it for this OCG TCG video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this new Byssted archetype. Are you guys a fan of the archetype? Are you mid with the archetype? Or do you not really care about the archetype? Let me know your guys' thoughts on just branded as a whole, just giving so much love recently. Like, again, I don't know who in Konami loves the branded series, but man, they just love giving support to this deck. I mean, the last two big supports that we had with the Albast structure deck and now this Byssted archetype, like, man, they just really want to push the branded series, which I'm completely fine with. I love the Albast cards. I think they look really sick, and then even these monsters, I love Lebellion's design. Like, that's easily still my favorite monster from this entire archetype, just based off of design, and even the effect as well, I think is pretty solid. But I would love to know your guys' thoughts on that as well, and again, just your overall thoughts on the new Byssted archetype. And yeah, with that being said, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care and have yourselves a great rest of your day.